Supreme Court has upset a 45-year precedent, ruling it unconstitutional for universities to consider race in admissions. Now, the 14th Amendment is supposed to promise equal protection. But if everyone was actually treated equally, we wouldn't have had to put in affirmative action. See? We wouldn't have had to do it. Right. People wouldn't have had to march and begged and gotten hosed and all of these things that people did to just balance us out with everything else going on in the country. So,
affirmative action is something that never should take place to begin with, because again, you cannot fight the inequalities of the past by making things unequal in the present. You can't have discrimination now because of discrimination that happened years ago. You can't do it. So again, you can't have, three sets of scores for one for whites, one for blacks, one for Asians. You can't do that. That, by its very definition, is not equal.
Why don't they get rid of this legacy stuff?
Amherst just did this. So colleges are now shifting how they're going to account for this because people are not. It is not lost on the population that there are problems with the way people are treated in this country. So Amherst has shifted to getting rid of legacy. You're also seeing, I think, and Sonny, correct me if I'm wrong, I was reading on something in Texas where they kind of, without race conscious or whatever the term is, they took the top 10% of every school in Texas and allowed them automatic acceptance into the state schools. And what that did is, we already know communities are segregated. So you're accounting for every school, which means you then have a high percentage of black and brown communities who are automatically getting accepted. So there were ways around it that we're seeing people get creative with to make sure they're accounting for that.
I kind of resent the legacy thing because, I was the first one in my family to go to college. And then I had cousins, obviously, who followed. But there was no Harvard graduate in my family. My father was a truck driver. My mother was a sewing machine operator, And so there was no legacy. That ticks me off a little bit.
And athletic.
But the other thing I would say about this is that it plays into what they're talking on the right about post-racial society that we're living in, Because we elected a black president, they think that racism is over. It's not. And that's what bothers me about this rolling back. And also what bothers me also is that what's next? Gay marriage? I mean, they want to get rid of abortion rights, which they practically have done. Now it'll be gay rights.
Marriage equality was codified by the Senate, which is important because they can't pull it back now.
But they're trying to do something.
And the states are trying to target. But can I say on this?
One thing I definitely agree with Joy Behar on, which is really surprising that I agree with her with anything. But one thing I do agree with her on is we had to get rid of this legacy stuff. Again, it should not matter that your parents went there, or you worked there, your parents worked there, or your parents gave money to the college. It shouldn't matter one bit. What should matter is your individual merit, what you individually do, personally do, what your personal grades are. That is what should matter. And again, we've got to get this straight. And it shouldn't matter that you went to a school, high school, that was in the top 10% of high schools in the state. That shouldn't matter. You should not be automatically accepted into state university because you went to those high schools. Again, it should be based on personal achievement, personal merit. That is it. That is what things should be. Again, where have we gone to a place? Why have we gone to a place to where everything is about the group, not about the individual? That's what it should be.
Say on this, I want to acknowledge that people are really passionate about this, and when something changes that's been in place for 40 years, that can be scary. I offer a bit of a different perspective. I think diversity is always a noble goal, and it's always something we should strive for, is representation. But I think that we need a system that looks at the full spectrum of diversity more. So, for example, a black student coming from a multi-millionaire family who everyone has an advanced degree in it, I wouldn't say should necessarily be given preferential treatment over a white, first in his family student from Appalachia Appalachia. Joy, who has the grades as well. And what they do say in this ruling, and what we're going to have to watch is how it's implemented, it does not mean that students cannot, in their personal statements, talk about their lived experience with regard to race. I think that's incredibly important, and those are weighted more heavily now as many schools are forgoing looking at standardized tests. So I think Harvard has almost as many students from the top 0.1%, not 1% income earners as from the entire bottom 20%. That's an inequity that I think has to be met.
And another inequity at Harvard is that 70% of the legacies are white, right? And, of course, yeah. And I will say that this could have been worse. It's already
it could
horrible.
always be worse.
But it could have been worse because when you read the opinion, at least Justice Roberts concludes and says, in this opinion, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting, as Alyssa just mentioned, universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. Race-blind admissions are not required. And I think that the lived experience of a white kid in Appalachia or perhaps on a potato farm in Idaho
Or in Brooklyn.
is different in this country for a black student, whether that black student be wealthy or not, because this country was founded on slavery. And Justice Sotomayor, I think, said it very well. She said, we live in a society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. So in my view, pretending that it is no longer an issue exacerbates the problem. If you look at a place like California, you had affirmative action dismantled in California in 1998. The very next year, 50% of blacks and Latinos were no longer in those institutions.
It's just because you're white does not mean you're privileged. It does not mean that. And again, majority of people, if they're really, truly honest, they understand that. They understand just because of the color of your skin does not dictate the privilege that you have. It doesn't. You know, again, man, some poor white kid from Appalachia who doesn't eat, properly. Again, he is not better off because of the color of his skin than some rich, black kid from California. Again, some rich brat who can have whatever he wants. Again, man, just because a kid in Appalachia is white does not make him privileged. Again, that does not exist. And if you believe that, there's something wrong with you. If you truly believe that just because, man, you're laying there dying on the ground, but you know what, you're privileged. You are privileged. You're more privileged than what I am. Some rich, black person because of the color of your skin, you're privileged. So what are you complaining about? I understand you're laying there bleeding, but what are you complaining about? Again, we have got to understand that just because you're white does not make you privileged, number one. And then also, number two, she was talking about this country was built on slavery or founded on slavery. No, it wasn't. Again, that was an acceptable practice at the time. But again, that practice was, it was slavery that was something that was practiced around the world at that time. Again, that doesn't make it right. And America and England, they did what they had to do to end that. But again, man, that was something that was practiced around the world. And America and England, they did what they had to do to end it. And they should have. And again, that doesn't make it right. But this country was not founded on slavery. It wasn't. Guys, we understand that people like Sandy Olson, what they're doing is they're everything is about race for them. Everything is about race. They have to make everything about racism. Everything. And the thing is, man, they are truly the ones that are racist. She was saying, number one, that these people that go to these Ivy League colleges, they tend to come from families that are, the top earners in the U.S. Well, of course they are. Of course they are. Because, again, man, we have to understand that the parents, again, they're doing well. And they put a value on education. they probably went to Ivy League schools. And again, they put value on those educations. So that is passed on to them. Again, that value, those set of values are passed on. And that's something we have to understand. Number one. Number two, man, she was saying that, these majority of legacy kids, again, they're white. Well, again, no offense, but those set of values are passed on. I'm not saying the legacy program should be continued. I'm not saying that people should be let into college because their parents worked there or something. I'm not saying that. They shouldn't be. But again, everything is about race with her. And, again, this thing with the program she was talking about, this affirmative action program that was dismantled, that resulted in black and brown people, not being enrolled as much in those schools. Well, that shows you right there what we want to avoid. We want to avoid people being propped up. They should not be there. Again, you should go to a college because you met the qualifications for being there. That is it. That is all. That is the only reason why you should be there. Again, you shouldn't be there because you're black and you scored a little bit lower and you're not doing so well. And, just because you're black or brown or whatever, be led into a college because they have a low amount of black people or brown people or whatever being enrolled there. Again, that kind of stuff is ridiculous. We should have one set of standards for everyone across the board. That should be the way it is. And again, man, affirmative action, they don't help people, not one single bit. Man, that says to the kids, oh, poor baby, you can't get it on your own merit. Well, we'll help you out. We'll give you a leg up. No, man, again, do the best you can. If you can't get into a particular college, go to another one. But again, man, I wasn't Harvard material. Again, when I was 18 years old, man, I was, I didn't go to college until I was like 30. Finished college until I was like 33 or something when I finished. So again, we have got to understand that, that just because there's a low amount of whatever in that college, we shouldn't alter the standards for certain people again, and we shouldn't do that. Again, that is ridiculous by its very nature. That is ridiculous. There should be one set of standards. But guys, hey, if you would, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Thanks.
You son of a